The story starts and our protagonist is passing by the convenience store. Some people are running away from the store, and a man comes out of it with a knife. The armed man targets two little girls, and our protagonist tackles the armed man and he saves the girls. Our protagonist then notices that he has been stabbed, and he starts losing consciousness. The girls he saved cry for him, and he is glad that they are okay. He thinks that he shouldn't have made them cry, and he dies. Our protagonist then wakes up in an unfamiliar room, and he wonders if he is in a hospital. The maid in the room then notices that he is awake, and she calls him Cain. She is glad that he is all right, and so is his mother. Cain then sees his reflection in the mirror, and he wonders who that is. His mother then asks Cain if he is all right, and the maid Sylvie thinks that Cain must be confused because he was asleep for over a week. Cain's mother then thinks that Cain must be hungry, and she leaves with the maid to get some soup for him. While alone, Cain takes a moment to assess his situation, and he wonders if he was reincarnated into another world. Cain makes his peace with dying, and he thinks that the first thing he needs to do is check his surroundings. Sylvie then comes into the room while Cain is checking out his body, and she wonders if Cain wet the bed. She tries to change his pants, and after changing them she feeds Cain some soup. After feeding Cain, Sylvie tries to make him burp and put him to sleep. Cain is embarrassed at being treated as a child, and Sylvie leaves his room after a while. Cain then mentions that he managed to get a lot of answers out of her, and Cain states that his name is Cain von Silford, and he is 3 years old. His father's name is Garm, and his mother's name is Sarah, and he has a big sister named Rain who is 2 years older than him. He explains that Sarah is the second wife, and the first wife's name is Maria, and she has 2 sons, Jin and Alec. Cain states that Garm is a margrave, and he has his own army that protects the border against foreign invaders. Later, Sylvie teaches Cain about the world, and she mentions that monsters, magic, and adventurers all exist in this world, and Cain is excited to hear that the things that he used to dream about are real. Cain thinks that he wants to use magic, and Sylvie mentions that it might take some time, and he needs to learn how to read and write first. Cain mentions that when he heard that this world has magic, he decided to live his life in it, and he had no qualms about leaving his old world because he didn't have any family there. A while later, Rain tells his father that Cain can now write, and he can do math as well. Garm thinks that it's amazing, and his mother mentions that Cain must be a genius. Cain can't tell them that he has the mind of a high schooler, and he mentions that Sylvie is just good at teaching. Garm then asks Cain why he suddenly decided to study, and Sarah mentions that Cain seems different ever since he came down with that fever. Cain then mentions that he is just trying to learn all he can about this world, and Garm mentions that he can't leave the estate to him, so it's a good way for him to find his success. Cain then asks permission from his father to read books on magic and the kingdom's history. His father allows it, but his sister mentions that he won't be able to use magic until he gets baptized. Garm mentions that he will need to wait until he is 5 years old to get baptized, and right now he can start by studying the books. Later we see that Cain can already use magic even though he hasn't been baptized. He tries to use it again, and the magic gets a little out of control. Sylvie and Rain then comes to his room, but thankfully he puts out the fire magic before they can see it. Rain then tells him that she knows that he has been reading about the outside world in secret, and she wonders if he wants her to teach him about it. From then on, Rain started teaching Cain about the outside world, and Cain learned about the 300-year history of the kingdom of Esfort. He found out how the first king of this kingdom started out as an adventurer, and his name was Yuya. He thinks that Yuya sounds like a Japanese name, and he wonders if this guy was also reincarnated like him. He also found out that there are elves, dwarves, and beast folk in this world. Cain thinks that he wants to go to the outside world, and he thinks that he can't wait for his baptism. 2 years then pass by, and it's finally time for Cain to be baptized. Cain gets dressed for his baptism, and they leave for the church. Cain can finally see the outside world, and he asks Rain what it's like to be bestowed with status magic. Rain shows him her status, and he notices that her sister has the title called Adorer of Cain, and he wonders what it means. She quickly hides it, and Cain pretends like he didn't see it. Sarah then mentions that Rain was granted a level 2 protection from the god of magic, and Cain wonders what that means. Garm explains that magic protections are attainable in level 1 to 5, and the higher the level the higher will be the user's natural talent. Sarah mentions that protections are given by God, and they then arrive at the church. Garm explains that the church worships the 7 pillar gods, and today they will be informing the gods that Cain has reached 5 years of age. Cain then prays to the gods, and the priest asks the gods to bestow Cain with their blessing. A light then shines from behind the statues of the gods, and Cain meets the gods in his mental plane. Cain then wonders where he is, and the gods tell him that he is in the world of the 7 gods. The god of creation then introduces himself as Xenum, and he tells Rhyme, the god of death and rebirth, to explain the situation to Cain. Rhyme mentions that Cain's death was unexpected, and she mentions that the criminal would have tripped and fell even if Cain didn't tackle him. She mentions that he died for nothing, and because of this the criminal was charged with murder. But since he died doing a good deed, the god of earth requested her to reincarnate him into this world. They meant to block his memories until he was 5 years old, but due to some reason he recalled them at the age of 3. Cain understands the situation, and he thanks the gods for letting him keep his memories. The goddess of magic then bestows Cain with her blessing, and the god of creation, war, technology, and the rest of the gods also bestow Cain with their blessings as well. They then send Cain back, and the priest mentions that he has never seen a light like that coming out of the statues. Garm wonders if this means that his son received more blessings, and he tells Cain to show him his status. Cain has a bad feeling about this, and he goes to a corner faking being sick, and he checks his stats. Cain notices that his stats are off the charts, and he notices that he has level 10 blessing of all the gods. He wonders how it's possible as the highest level should be 5, and he then notices that he has the ability to create magic. He creates a magic called Status Conceal to hide his status. The scene cuts to Cain and his family at the dinner table, and they celebrate Cain's 5th birthday. Garm then wonders if Cain checked his status, and Cain mentions that he did, and he received lots of protections from the gods. Cain then shows them his stats, and they are all surprised to see it. They notice that Cain has the protection of all 7 of the gods, and he has a number of skills. Garm thinks that with this many skills he will be guaranteed success in whatever career he chooses, and he tells Cain to never show his status to anyone. He states that he could be considered a threat to the kingdom, and he could be put under state supervision. He asks the servants to keep this a secret as well, and Cain then goes to his room. Cain then notices a book on summoning magic, and he goes outside, and he tries to summon something fluffy and cute. But he ends up summoning a monster instead, and his sister and her friend then comes there. The monster tries to hurt them, and Cain tries to protect them with his magic. But it doesn't work, and the monster punches Cain. Cain then uses summoning magic to send the monster back, and he falls to the ground. The girls are worried about him, and they ask him if he is all right. Cain then thinks that he made people cry again, and he wonders if he is going to die once more. Cain then notices that he is all right, and the girls are glad. Cain then thinks that this time he was able to make people smile, and he thinks that in this life he can use his powers to make people smile. The scene changes to Cain's debut ceremony, and he thanks everyone for attending it. Garm then asks Cain what he would like to be in the future, and Cain mentions that he wants to be an adventurer who can protect people's smiles. The story continues, and Garm mentions that Cain would need to study a lot more to become an adventurer, and he states that he will arrange a tutor for him. Cain is excited to hear this, and later he thinks what his tutor is going to be like. He wonders if he will be ripped or be more like a witch. Sylvie then tells Cain that his tutor is here. Cain uses his move spell to teleport, and he ends up falling on a girl's boobs. The girl wonders if Cain needs a nurse, and she states that she can't produce milk yet. Cain then apologizes, and the butler introduces Cain to his new tutors named Millie and Nina. The scene cuts to the tutors introducing themselves to Cain's parents, and the green-haired one introduces herself as Nina, and the red-haired one introduces herself as Millie. They are both D-rank adventurers, and Cain notices that Nina is an elf. Cain then tells them they don't need to speak so politely to him as they are his tutors, and Garm mentions that they will be teaching Cain for 3 years. Millie mentions that they should get started right away, and they go to the training grounds. Millie mentions that they will be starting with swordsmanship, and she tells Cain to start with some swings. Cain swings his sword, and Millie wonders how Cain is so good. Nina thinks that he might be better than Millie, and Millie mentions that she won't lose to a 5-year-old. Millie then tells Cain that they should have a mock battle since Cain can already swing the sword like that, and Cain attacks Millie. Cain then attacks Millie rapidly, and Nina wonders if Cain has the protection of the god of war. Cain mentions that he does, and his father told him to not talk about this with anybody outside his family. Millie then tells Cain to stop, and she mentions that she won't be able to keep up with him at this pace. She tells Nina to start teaching him magic, and Nina mentions that she has level 3 protection from the goddess of magic. Nina mentions that they will start with the basics, and Cain states that he already learned that. Cain then shows Nina some of the spells he can use, and Nina notices that Cain can use enchanted magic. She thinks that it takes intense training to learn enchanted magic, and Cain is a genius to achieve that at the age of 5. Millie then points out that Cain can use all elements, and Nina thinks that it's impossible, as even Sage class mages can't use all the elements. Nina then asks Cain if he also has the protection of the god of magic, and Cain mentions that he does. Millie then whispers to Nina that they might not be able to teach him anything, and Cain then pulls out a towel from his item box. They are surprised to see that he also has the item box skill, and they think that nothing can surprise them anymore. Nina then mentions that they can't teach him here, as this place won't last long against his power. Cain then wonders if they can conduct his lessons outside, and he mentions that he has never left the mansion except for his baptism. Millie thinks that it might be better if they practice outside, and she mentions that they will need to convince his father first. The scene then cuts to them asking permission from his father, and they mention that Cain has surpassed the beginner level in both magic and swordsmanship. They state that teaching him intermediate level here will destroy the mansion, and Gar mentions that he knew that this day would come, but he never expected it on Cain's first day of training. They then ask for permission to teach him outside the mansion, and Garm agrees, but he mentions that they have to return by sundown. They then venture out of the mansion, and they arrive at the plains. Nina now tells Cain to try intermediate magic on a rock lying around, and Cain mentions that he will start with Firewall. He then uses Firewall, and he decimates the rock. Millie then thinks that the spell must have drained a lot of Cain's magic power, and she wonders if Cain feels tired. Cain mentions that he doesn't, and they are surprised that Cain also has an insane amount of magic. A killer rabbit then attacks them, and Cain slays it with his air bullet. The tutors congratulate him on his first kill, and Cain stores the rabbit in his item box, and he mentions that he will show it to his mother and sister. They think that the item box is cool, and Millie mentions that she is planning to buy a magic bag when she saves up enough money. Nina explains that a magic bag is just like an item box, but they are pricey. Millie then mentions that they should hunt some more monsters, and she asks Nina to use her search magic to find the monsters. Nina uses her search magic to find a few killer rabbits ahead of them, and Cain then asks her how she used that magic. Nina mentions that she spread around her own magic in a thin layer, and Cain then tries using it. Cain manages to use the magic, and he locates 4 killer rabbits ahead of them. Nina is surprised that Cain also managed to find their specific number, and they then slay the killer rabbits. One of them goes into the forest, and Nina tells Cain to not venture there as that forest is inhabited by dangerous monsters. She mentions that the monsters in that forest stage an outbreak on the city every decade, and they tell Cain to become a strong adventurer so he can protect the city when the time comes. Cain agrees, and the scene cuts to Cain at his house, and he notices that he has leveled up to level 8. He thinks that this is abnormal, and he notices that he has an ability which allows him to gain experience points 100 times faster, and he thinks that if people find out about this then he will be executed. The next day they go to the guild, and Millie mentions that since Cain is stronger now he can fight stronger monsters, and they can get some info on the monsters from the guild. Millie then talks to the receptionist Rudy, and she asks her if there is anything stronger than killer rabbits in the area. Rudy mentions that she has gotten some reports about wolves, and Millie thinks that they will be perfect for Cain. Rudy then asks Cain how old he is, and Nina tells her that he is the son of the domain lord. Rudy then apologizes for her rude behavior, and they both introduce themselves, and Cain tells her that he is 5 years old. A C-rank adventurer Cross then bullies Nina and Millie, and he asks them to pour him some drinks. They refuse to do so, and he mentions that they are D-rank adventurers, and they should listen to a C-ranker. Cross then tries to be forceful, and a few of his men also joins him. Cain then tells Cross that he needs to train, and he asks Cross to not interfere with him. Cross doesn't listen, and Cain attacks him with a chop, and he knocks him down. Cross then draws a blade, and Cain dodges all of his attacks. Cain then kicks him out of the guild, and he also takes out his lackeys. Nina then thanks Cain for protecting them, and Millie can't believe that Cain can also use martial arts. They then head to the forest and Cain practices magic. 3 years then pass by, and Sylvie mentions that both of his tutors have declined to extend the duration of their contract. Cain then wonders if he can do something to thank them, and he remembers that they wanted some magic bags. At night Cain goes to the forest and he hunts a bloody ogre and an earth dragon with fire magic to get the materials he needs for the magic bags. A soldier notices the fire magic from the city walls, and he sounds the alarm, and the army marches out to the forest. Cain then uses move to return to the mansion, and he accidentally leaves his towel behind. Garm and the soldiers then arrive at the scene, and they notice a crater there, but there isn't a single monster. Garm then notices Cain's towel in the crater, and the scene cuts to Cain fighting a pack of wolves. Millie thinks that Cain has gotten stronger, and Nina mentions that it's a little sad that they have to say goodbye today. Cain then states that he is done, and Millie tells him that he has done great for the past 3 years. Cain thanks them for their guidance, and he gives them the magical bags as a thank you gift. He mentions that he made them himself, and he states that the red one is made out of bloody ogre skin, and the green one is made out of the earth dragon skin. They ask where he got the materials from, and he mentions that he hunted the monsters himself. Millie then mentions that it normally takes an entire party of A-rank adventurers to take down those monsters, and she can't believe that an 8-year-old did it alone. Cain then mentions that the bags can only hold things as big as his mansion, and Millie mentions that the bag she was going to buy would only hold about 2 carriages, and even that would have cost her a lot of money. They think that a bag like this is a national treasure class, and they mention that carrying it around will make them a target for thieves. Cain then mentions that they don't need to worry about that as the bags would get as heavy as the items inside them if someone other than the 3 of them holds them. They then mention that this would make the bags even beyond national treasure class, and they ask Cain if he is sure that they can have them. Cain mentions that he is, and they then kiss him on the cheek to thank him. They then mention that Cain can look for them if he ever needs their help, and they say their goodbyes. Later Cain's father comes to his room, and he mentions that he found his towel in the forest. He asks him to explain himself, and Cain mentions that he used intermediate magic to fight a earth dragon and a bloody ogre. Garm then tells Cain that he needs to know his limits, as he is just an 8-year-old, and the scolding continues for a while. The story continues with Cain fighting a dragon, and he defeats it with a single strike. Cain can't believe that it's really dead, and he then checks his stats. He notices that he has over 80 million magic points, and he has received the titles Enemy of All Monsters and Dragon Killer. The scene then changes, and 2 years after his training with his tutors Cain is heading to the royal capital to make his debut. Cain is now 10 years old, and Rain mentions that she can't wait to live with Cain in the capital. She tells him to start attending the school right now, and her father then mentions that Cain can't attend the academy until he is 12. Cain then asks Rain if she is excited about attending the academy, and she mentions that she will take the top position in the exams. Cain then asks how long it will take for them to reach the capital, and Gar mentions that it will take them 1 week if they don't encounter any monsters on the way. Cain then searches for monsters using his search skill, and he tells his father that there is a battle going on 3 kilometers ahead of them. He mentions that a few dozen monsters are swarming 10 people, and Garm tells the knights to move faster. Cain mentions that the knights won't make it in time, and he decides to go himself. He uses wind magic to travel fast, and the scene cuts to some knights battling orcs. The knights are on the verge of losing, and Cain then intervenes, and he starts fighting the orcs. Cain defeats the orcs easily with the use of his magic and sword skills, and he also defeats the orc general. Cain then introduces himself to the knights as the third son of Margrave Cain von Silford, and the knights from the Margraves group also arrive at the scene. They notice that the monsters are already dead, and Cain uses healing magic to heal all the knights. Cain then stores all the dead soldiers in his item box, and Garm arrives there. Garm notices the crest of Duke Santana on the carriage that the knights were protecting, and Princess Telestia and Lady Silk come out of the carriages. Garm mentions that he is glad to see that they are safe, and the ladies thank them for saving their lives. They are curious about Cain, and he introduces himself to them. Princess Telestia then suffers from a headache, and Cain asks her permission to calm her mind using magic. The princess permits him, and Cain uses his relax spell to calm both of their minds. The spell makes their hearts feel lighter, and all of their pain and exhaustion disappears. They both feel relaxed, and the princess then thanks Cain for saving their lives, and Lady Silk does the same. Silk mentions that she saw him through the window, and both his magic and swordsmanship were amazing. The princess and Lady Silk then fight over Cain, and Silk asks him what brings him out here. Cain mentions that he was on his way to the capital for his debut, and the ladies mention that they were also on their way to their debuts. They invite Cain to travel with them, and they take him to their carriage, and they leave. While in the carriage, Cain thinks that this is too cramped, and he asks them if he can sit on the other side. The girls mention that they are scared, and they would feel safer if he is by their side. The princess then asks Cain to call her Tellies, and Lady Silk also asks him to call her Silk. Cain hesitates as they are both ladies of noble status higher than his own, but the girls still insist, and Cain has no choice but to do as they say. The guard then interrupts them, and he mentions that they are approaching the town of Renoma, and they should prepare to disembark. Cain asks him if he saw all that, and the guard mentions that he did, and Cain gets embarrassed. After arriving at the town, Cain tells them that he will see them tomorrow, and the princess mentions that she wants to be with him tonight as well. Lady Silk states the same, and Garm then intervenes, and he mentions that it won't be appropriate for a boy and a girl to share a room. The princess then mentions that the sight of the horrific things that happened today won't leave her mind, and Lady Silk wonders what they will do if monsters attack them during night. Garm mentions that he can arrange a maid for them, and Lady Silk mentions that Cain is the strongest person here, and the princess wants Cain to protect them. The ladies then ask Cain if he doesn't want to share a room with them, and Cain hesitantly agrees, but he states that their room should be large. Garm then tells Cain to act with prudence, and the girls are happy to share a room with Cain. The scene cuts to them arriving at their room, and the princess asks Cain if she could sleep next to him. Lady Silk asks the same thing, and the princess then mentions that Cain would have to sleep in the middle. Both Lady Silk and the princess then move their beds closer to Cain's, and Cain mentions that they should put the beds back to normal. The girls mention that knights are scary and they are afraid of the monsters, and they won't be able to sleep if they aren't close to him. Cain tries to refuse them, but it's no use, and he has no choice but to give in to their selfish demands. The next day Cain thinks that he wasn't able to sleep at all last night, and he mentions that he also spent the next few days without any sleep. After a few more days they arrive at the royal capital, and a knight welcomes them back. He notices that the girls are linking hands with a boy, and the girls mention that Cain saved them. The knight recognizes his name, and he introduces himself as Diam, the vice-captain of the Royal Chivalric Order. He mentions that the knights have already explained everything to him, and he thanks Cain for protecting the princess and the lady. The scene changes and Cain takes out the fallen soldiers from his item box. Diam thanks him for bringing them back, and he mentions that they normally have to burn their bodies where they fall, but thanks to Cain they will be able to return them to their families. Cain mentions that these soldiers fought their hardest to protect the two ladies, and Diam mentions that he will make sure to tell everyone that their efforts were not in vain. Diam then tells Cain that the king wants to have an audience with him, and the scene changes to Cain entering the throne room. The minister tells the court that the princess and Lady Silk were attacked by a group of 50 orcs on their way to the capital, and Cain saved them by eliminating all of them single-handedly. The nobles in the court find it hard to believe that a youngster like Cain was able to achieve all this. The king then commends Cain for a job well done, and he promotes Cain to the rank of baron. He also grants him 10 platinum coins and a mansion. A noble named Corgino then objects to this, and he mentions that they can't grant peerage to a 10-year-old. The king mentions that they can't keep such a talented man in a powerless position, and his decision will not be changed. Corgino then withdraws, and the king asks Cain if he will accept this reward. Cain thinks that he doesn't have a choice, and he accepts it with gratitude. The audience then ends, and the king invites Cain to the parlor. At the parlor, Garm states that he never expected Cain to be granted peerage, and the king then enters the room. The king and the duke then thank Cain for saving their daughters, and the duke introduces himself as Silk's father, Eric von Santana. Garm then states that he thought that only minors who lost their parents are allowed to receive peerage at a young age, and the king mentions that since Cain excels in both magic and swordsmanship, it wouldn't be right for the kingdom to leave him to his own devices. The king mentions that he will be receiving pay according to his status, and he states that he can ask Garm if he has any questions about the nobility. The king and the duke then ask Cain to take the hand of their daughters in marriage, and he states that they won't be formally married until they reach adulthood, but for now they can be engaged. Cain wonders why, and the king and the duke mention that Cain linked arms with their daughters, and they also slept in the same room. They mention that nobody will take them as brides after this, and the story goes back in time by a bit. We see that the king and the others are discussing what to do with Cain, and the minister suggests the idea of granting him peerage. He mentions that making him stand on his own will show them who he truly is, and after hearing that the young ladies are smitten with him, the king decides to make him their fiancé. He mentions that he will do everything he can to keep Cain in this kingdom, and the story returns to the present. The king and the duke ask Cain to take responsibility for his actions, and Cain agrees to the engagement, seeing no other way out of the situation. The ladies then mention that they will never forget the nights that they spent together, and the king asks Cain what he did with them. They ask Cain to show some discretion, and Cain apologizes. The story continues, and Cain is in the church to have a meeting with the gods. Cain mentions that he overdid things while leveling up, and he states that he would like to consult them about his status. Xenom mentions that his current numbers are quite inhuman, and he asks Cain if he would like to become a demigod. Xenom explains that demigods are in the same class as holy beasts and divine dragons, and he tells Cain that he should understand that there are limits to what he can do alone. Xenom then changes the subject, and he mentions that there isn't much entertainment in this realm, so he would like Cain to use his knowledge from his previous life to create some. Cain thinks that if he could bring items from his own world to this world, they would be a hit, and the gods ask him to do it. The scene then changes, and Cain is in a female clothes store where Rain is buying some clothes. Cain thinks that this is awkward, and he runs out of the store. Cain then notices Parma, the cat girl he saved from his summon monster, outside the store, and Parma asks Cain what he is doing here. Cain mentions that he is here for his debut, and he asks her what she is doing here. Parma states that she is training at her uncle's shop, and Parma then introduces her uncle to Cain as Tamanis. Cain then wonders if he can take a look around his shop, and he notices that they have a lot of different type of items in their shop. Cain then mentions that there is a certain recreational item that he would like to make, and he asks Tamanis if he would be willing to produce and sell it. Tamanis mentions that he will, and Cain tells him about Reversi. Tamanis thinks that this is great, and he thinks this would definitely sell. Cain then asks Tamanis if he can produce a prototype of this, and he gives him a gold coin to cover the expenses. Tamanis mentions that this is too much, and Cain tells him to think of it as an investment. Tamanis accepts, and he takes on the undertaking as the head of the Sarakeen company. Cain then leaves the store, and Rain gets angry at him for leaving without telling her. Rain mentions that she wanted Cain to see how she looks in her new clothes, and Cain mentions that he already knows that she looks great in everything she wears. This makes Rain happy, and she mentions that she is going to show all her outfits to Cain at home. They then go to their home, and Rain shows Cain all of her outfits, and she then asks Cain to show her his outfits. Sylvie then tells Cain that Tamanis has asked him to come to his shop, and Cain goes to his shop. Tamanis shows Cain the prototype, and Cain thinks that it looks exactly like he pictured it. Cain then plays it with Parma, and he shows how the game works. Tamanis thinks that this is great, and he is positive that this will sell. Cain then tells Tamanis to produce two different versions, one for the nobles, and one for the commoners. Cain explains that the nobles would prefer a fancier product, and he tells Tamanis to make 50 noble versions, and 1,000 of the regular versions. Tamanis then mentions that their company doesn't have this much funds, and Cain gives him 5 gold coins. Tamanis then thanks Cain for the investment, and he states that they should start by forming a contract and presenting this to the god of commerce. Tamanis mentions that once they form the contract, no one will be able to produce the same product for 3 years, and they offer the product to the god of commerce. Cain then asks Tamanis to produce an extra extravagant Reversi as he wants to give it to the royal household, and Tamanis agrees to do it. Cain then goes to his house, and Sylvie informs him that the debut ceremony is about to begin. Cain then leaves for the ceremony with his family, and Garm tells Cain that he will be drawing a lot of attention today because he got promoted to the position of Baron, and he should watch out for parents who are trying to introduce him to their daughters. Cain mentions that he will find a way to deal with them, and they then reach the palace. At the venue, Cain notices Silk and Duke Eric, and Cain thinks that the Duke's smile scares him. Garm then introduces them to Cain, and Cain thinks that their last meeting wasn't public. Eric then thanks Cain for saving his daughter, and he hopes that they will have a favorable relationship. Silk then greets Cain, and Cain praises Silk's outfit, and he states that she looks like a princess. This makes Silk happy, and Eric then intervenes, and he mentions that Cain is too skilled with the ladies for a 10-year-old. Garm explains that this is because of his sister Rain, as she gets upset if he isn't careful around her. They then take their leave, and the king then enters the room with his family. The king greets everyone, and he asks them to do their best for the kingdom. The nobles then introduce themselves to the king, and it's finally Cain's turn. Cain greets the king and the princess, and he compliments the princess on her dress, saying that she looks like a goddess. This makes the princess happy, and the king asks Garm how he raised his child to be such a philanderer. Cain then thinks that the king's smile is also scary, and he then tells the king that he would like to present something to him. Cain then takes out the reversi set from his item box, and he mentions that this is a game he developed in cooperation with the Sarakeen Company. The king thinks that this sounds interesting, and he would like to hear more about this later. The king then invites Cain to the parlor after the ceremony, and he mentions that he would also like to talk to him about his daughter. Garm then mentions that he didn't know that Cain was involved in the production of a game, and Cain mentions that he thought that he would need a lot of money to maintain his mansion after becoming a baron, and Garm understands. Garm then mentions that he has to go back to make his rounds, and he states that Cain should talk to the other children as a child would. Silk then approaches Cain, and she offers him a drink. They then talk, and Silk mentions that she is glad that she got to know Cain, as she now has someone else to talk to other than Tellys. Cain then asks Silk to stop using titles while talking to him, and Silk starts calling Cain by his name. A noble child named Habit then comes there, and he greets Silk. He thinks that Silk would be thrilled to be greeted by him, and Silk then greets him coldly. His lackeys tell Cain that he should at least introduce himself, and Cain then introduces himself as a baron. The others think that he is the son of a baron, and they belittle him for being a baron's son. Habit then asks Cain to apologize to him for not greeting him properly, and Silk tries to intervene, but Cain stops her, and he mentions that Habit will be the one apologizing. This makes Habit angry, and he asks Cain to step outside. They then step outside, and Silk asks Cain what he is going to do. Silk mentions that she is worried about Cain, and Habit then asks them to stop flirting. He mentions that his two lackeys have the protection of the god of magic, and Silk pretends to be afraid, and she clings to Cain. Habit's lackeys then try to use magic, and they forget their incantations. They then check their books, and they read the incantations from the books. Both the kids then use their magic, but their magical output is too low, and their attacks are harmless. They then try to use their magic on Cain again, and Silk interrupts them, and she mentions that she doesn't know how they got so confused, but Cain is not the son of a baron, he is a baron. She mentions that he is the third son of Margrave Cain von Silford, and he saved Princess Telestia and her from an army of 50 orcs. Silk then tell them that they should be bowing to him, and they ask for Cain's forgiveness. They then leave, and Silk thinks Cain is quite devious for not attempting to right their misunderstanding. She mentions that she will have to tell Tellys about this, and Cain asks her to keep this a secret from her. Silk mentions that she will if he agrees to go on a date with her, and Tellys then comes there, and she asks them what they are talking about. Silk tries to tell her, but Cain stops her, and Tellys mentions that touching an unmarried woman's lips is scandalous, and she states that she will have to tell Duke Eric about this. Tellys then asks them to tell her the truth, and Silk tells her that Cain promised to take her on a date. Tellys mentions that this is not fair, and she asks him to take her on a date as well. Cain agrees, and the king then asks Cain where he is planning to take his daughter. Later Cain plays reversi with the king, and the king thinks that this game is fun. Cain mentions that he is going to share this with the entire kingdom, and Eric then tells Cain that he has heard that Cain has arranged a date with Silk. He mentions that the plans of their engagement are still a secret, and both the king and Eric ask Cain to be careful on their date. The story continues, and the Minister Magna gives Cain the keys and the map for his new mansion. He mentions that the king is meeting with someone right now, but he wanted to play reversi with him when he heard that he was coming, and it was pretty hard to talk him out of it. Cain thinks that he will be able to return home early, but the Duke then comes into the room, and he asks Cain to play a match of reversi with him. Magna and some other nobles also ask Cain to play a match with him, and Cain thinks that he can't go home early. The scene then cuts to Cain going to see his mansion, and Cain notices that the mansion is really run down. He notices that even the lights are not functioning, and he uses a light spell to help him explore the mansion. Cain explores all the different rooms in the mansion, and he notices that the mansion is quite filthy. He thinks that he should do a little cleaning, and he uses the spells, all clean, and all repair to clean and repair the mansion. The mansion is now as good as new, and Sylvie then arrives in the mansion with some other maids. Sylvie mentions that she is happy that Cain asked her to come here, and she states that she will work hard with the maids here. Cain's new butler then introduces himself as Colin, and he states that Seabass has told him a lot about Cain. Sylvie then states that she will get started on the cleaning, and she directs the maid to clean different parts of the house. The maids notice that the house doesn't have a speck of dust in it, and Cain tells Sylvie that he cleaned the house with magic. Sylvie then mentions that she is going to prepare to receive all of Cain's things, and Colin mentions that they are going to take care of things here, and Cain should return to Lord Garm's mansion. Cain then remembers that his brothers are going to come home today, and the scene cuts to Cain meeting his brothers. Cain's brothers mention that they didn't expect Cain to be granted peerage before them, and Rain states that she can't wait to see Cain's mansion. Cain's brothers mention if Rain is sure about this, as the mansion is quite run down, and scary things might show up there. Rain states that Cain is going to protect her, and Cain mentions that nothing scary is going to show up. The scene changes to Cain's parents and sister coming to his mansion, and they are surprised to see that it looks like a brand new house. Garm states that this mansion was falling apart when he was here a few years ago, and he wonders if Cain did something. Cain mentions that he used magic to repair and clean it, and he then gives his family a tour of the mansion. Garm states that the mansion is lacking in works of art, and he states that nobles are fond of artwork, and they decorate their mansion with paintings, vases, and mounted monsters. Cain mentions that he has put up a mounted monster, and they then hear Sylvie crying for help. Cain goes to check it out, and he notices that the maids are afraid of the mounted dragon. Cain thinks that he forgot to explain this to them, and he explains that this is a mounted red dragon. Garm wonder why Cain has such a thing here, and Cain states that he defeated this monster a while back in the forest. Garm states that even a party of rank adventurers can barely take down a red dragon, and he can't believe that Cain took it out by himself. Garm then mentions that Cain should have explained things to the maids, and he states that a mounted red dragon is worth 1,000 platinum coins. Cain thinks that this equals to 10 billion yen, and he then hears his sister and mother crying out. They go to check things out, and Rain wonders what Cain has done to the toilet, as it shoots out water at them. Cain mentions that he used magic to do that, and Rain asks them to do this to their toilet as well. Garm thinks that they shouldn't make such a big fuss over a toilet, and they then tell him to try it out for himself. Garm tries it out, and he likes it as well. Garm then mentions that the visitors will be pleased with this, and he explains that nobles who come into ownership of a mansion have to hold a debut party for it. The scene cuts to Cain thinking what he should do about the party, and Colin states that he has already prepared a list of the guests he should invite to the party. Cain checks out the list, and he wonders if he doesn't have to invite the king. Colin states that only counts or higher-ranked nobles can invite the king, and Cain then finds out that he will also need gifts and food for the nobles. Cain wonders what he should gift the nobles, and Sylvie states that Cain should treat the guests to his own brand of hospitality instead of adhering to formalities. Cain then creates some fancy glasses for the party, and he mentions that he is going to give the glasses as a gift to the nobles. Sylvie thinks that the guests are going to love this, and Cain makes more glasses. The scene then cuts to the chef serving a dish, and he states that he has made it according to the recipe that he received from Cain. Cain then asks Sylvie to taste the food for him, and Sylvie thinks that this is delicious. Cain states that this is called Hamburg steak, and she then tastes the drink. She thinks that the drink is fizzy and bubbly, and Cain mentions that this is sparkling wine, and he used magic to make the regular wine fizzy. He asks Sylvie if the bubbles are too strong, and Sylvie states that she will need to try some more to find it out. Sylvie then tries a few bottles of it, and Cain takes that to mean that the wine is good. The king then summons Cain into the castle, and he states that he has not received an invitation to his mansion's debut party. He asks him why he sent invitations to Eric and Magna but not him. Cain mentions that he was planning on giving him the invitation in person, but he couldn't find the right opportunity for it. He then gives the king an invitation, and this makes the king happy. Cain is then glad that he followed Colin's advice and brought an invitation with him. The king mentions that he is going to bring Telestia with him, and the duke states that he is also going to bring Silk with him. The scene then changes to Cain's house, and the maids are surprised to hear that the king will be attending the party. They wonder why, and Cain tells them that the third princess Telestia is his fiancée, and this surprises them even more. Cain then mentions that he is counting on the maids to make everyone feel welcome, and the maids state that they will do their best. The scene then cuts to the party, and Cain greets the nobles and he leads them inside. The duke notices the red-mounted dragon, and he mentions that he never thought that he would actually see one of them in real life. Silk is excited to know that she will be living here one day, and Colin then states that it's time for Cain to offer his greetings. Cain then offers his greetings to everyone, and he makes a toast. The guests drink the wine, and they love how it's cold and it pops in their mouth. Cain mentions that he used water magic to chill it, and he states that the glasses are his gift to all the attendees, and they can take it back with them. The king then comes to the party, and he tells Cain that he has never seen a glass like this. He then tastes the wine, and he likes it as well. Cain then serves the Hamburg steak to the king, and the king absolutely loves the steak. Teles loves the steak as well, and the queen then asks Cain how water is spurting out of his toilet. She mentions that he must put that in the palace as well, and the king wonders what they are talking about. The queen tells the king to try it out for himself, and the king tries it out. The king then asks Cain why he didn't tell him about this sooner, and he asks him to put one in the palace tomorrow. Cain agrees, and Colin then tells Cain that Marquis Corgino is here. Cain goes to greet the Marquis, and the Marquis then goes inside, but Cain doesn't warn him about the mounted dragon. The Marquis gets scared after seeing the dragon, and Cain explains that it's a mounted monster. The Marquis then talks trash about Cain's party, and Sylvie serves him the wine. Corgino tastes the wine, and he likes it, but he badmouths it. Cain then serves him the Hamburg steak, and he loves it as well, but he also badmouths it. Cain then gets pissed off at him, and Colin states that he shouldn't be rude to a marquis. Cain then gets an idea, and he presents the glasses to the marquis as a gift. The marquis states that he likes the glasses, and he asks Cain to give him 100 of them. Cain states that he can't do that as he is going to give them as gifts to everyone, and the marquis then talks rudely to Cain, and Cain then checks the position of the king with his search spell. The king then comes close to the marquis, and Cain obstructs his view of the king. Cain then steps aside, and the king witnesses the marquis's tyrannical behavior. The king mentions that he is going to rethink some future events if this is how the marquis behaves, and the marquis mentions that he was impressed with the glasses and the food, and he was just asking Cain how they were made. The king states that it's good then, and he asks the marquis to conduct himself in a manner that sets an example for the other nobles. The marquis understands, and he takes his leave. The king then realizes that Cain just used him to teach a lesson to the marquis, and he gets angry at Cain. The story continues, and Cain visits Diam to give him some of the monster materials that he has, as he was advised by the minister Magnet to do so. Diam then takes Cain to a room, and he tells him to put the materials here. Cain mentions that this room is too small for the materials, and Diam wonders if they are all like the red dragon he has in his mansion. Cain states that they are not as impressive as that, and he mentions that he just has an earth dragon. Diam thinks that even an A-rank party can barely take that down, and Cain states that he doesn't know much about it, but it's a big one. Diam then tells Cain to take out the monsters on the training ground, and he states that the knights will move them later. Cain then takes out the monsters, and Diam is surprised to see so many powerful monsters. Diam can't believe that a kid could kill all these, and he asks Cain if he is a hero or a disciple of God. Cain hesitates for a moment, and he mentions that he is just the son of Margrave Garm. Diam then mentions that he won't probe too deeply, and he states that it will take some time to appraise this many monsters. Cain states that it's fine, and he mentions that he will come when it's done. He tries to leave, but Diam stops him, and he mentions that he would like Cain to help him train the knights and meet their captain. He mentions that their captain loves strong people, and he would like to show off what Cain can do. Cain hesitantly agrees, and Diam introduces him to the knights as the Baron who defeated 50 orcs. Cain asks him where the captain is, and Diam states that she will be here when the mock battle begins. Cain wonders if it's going to be some scary dude, and Diam states that Cain doesn't need to worry about that. Diam then begins the mock battle, and one of the knights states that the Royal Chivalric Order shouldn't fight a child. Diam states that he can go first if he is worried, and the knight faces off against Cain. The knight grants Cain the first move, and Cain uses the boost spell to accelerate and finish the battle. Diam then tells Cain that this was an excellent battle, and he should take on the entire order next. Cain is then about to battle the Order of Knights, and a girl shows up there, and she mentions that an entire order of knights shouldn't point their swords at a child. She asks Cain if he is alright, and she states that he will be okay now that she is here. The girl then asks Diam why he didn't stop this, and Diam mentions that this is the boy who annihilated 50 orcs and saved the princess. Hearing this, the girl gets excited, and she asks Cain to have a duel with her. Diam addresses her as captain, and he mentions that she should introduce herself, and the captain states that they will talk with their swords. The duel then begins, and the captain uses boost, and she attacks Cain. They then fight a high-speed battle, and the other knights are astounded to see this. Cain then uses the clock up spell to accelerate even more, and he defeats the captain. The captain then mentions that she has decided that she is going to marry Cain. This surprises everyone, and Cain states that he can't marry her as he is only 10 years old, and he knows nothing about her. The captain then introduces herself as Stefana von Liebert, and she states that she holds the title of Viscount, and she is the daughter of Duke Liebert, who oversees the Northern Forest. She states that Cain doesn't need to worry about their age difference since she is an elf, and she will live for at least 300 years, and she is quite confident about her looks. Cain then mentions that she is a duke's daughter, and she can't make decisions about her own marriage. Stefana states that Cain doesn't need to worry about that as when she left home she told her father that she would only return when she has found a marriage partner. Cain then states that it may be fine for her, but he still has to consult his father, and lots of other people. Stefana states that it's true, and she tells Diam to arrange a meeting with the king. Cain thinks that this is the worst thing that could happen, and Diam then drags Cain to the king. The scene changes to them talking with the king, and the king asks Cain why he is here. Stefana then mentions that she has decided that Cain and her are going to be married. This surprises everyone, and the king asks Cain to explain everything from the beginning. Cain explains everything, and the king asks him if he hasn't told her about Telestia and Miss Silk. Cain states that he didn't as this matter was supposed to be confidential, and Garm then asks Cain if he even realizes the position that Captain Stefana holds. Cain states that he only knows that she is the captain of knights, and the king then explains that the territory she comes from was originally a nation of elves. He mentions that the elves are all beautiful, and because of that they were often captured and sold into slavery, but here in Esfort, as per the first king's dying wish, there is no discrimination based on race. The king states that Liber territory is no different than a self-governed nation, and Tefana is essentially a princess. The king then informs Tefana that Cain is already engaged to Princess Telestia and Miss Silk, and Tefana states that this means that Cain is extraordinary enough to be recognized by both the king and Duke Eric, and this just makes her want to marry Cain all the more. The king then acknowledges her feelings for him, and he states that she should first write a letter to her father Lyson, and earn his permission, and they will talk about this after that. Tefana agrees, and she takes Cain with her to write the letter. The king then states that he can't believe that Cain even defeated the captain of knights, and he wonders how he is so powerful. Diam then mentions that Cain did react when he asked him if he was a hero or disciple of the gods, and Magnus states that they can test him by showing him a special book. Later Cain meets Diam in the training grounds, and Diam mentions that Cain looks exhausted. Cain states that he is fighting Tefana ever since that day, and she never lets him go until his endurance has reached its limit. Diam states that thanks to him their captain has gotten even stronger, and Cain asks Diam if Tefana has always been like that. Diam states that she has, and she always leaves all the night business to him. Tefana then comes looking for Cain, and before she could find him Diam drags Cain away, and he mentions that the king wants to see him. The scene then changes to Cain meeting with the king, and Cain asks them why they are all here. The king mentions that he has called Cain here because he wants to show him something, and Magnus shows Cain an emperor-level magic text that has been passed down in the royal family. He states that it was written by the first king Uyatara Hirasawa, and Cain mentions that even the magic texts at the palace mage's library only went up to mega level. He looks at the book, and he thinks that he has never seen this spell, and he mentions that he knew that there was an even higher level. The king mentions that none of them can read this text, as it was written in a language called Japanese, and they only knew that this was an emperor-level magic text because they were told so. The king then asks Cain who he really is, and Cain thinks that he can't hide it anymore. He wonders if he is going to lose everything if they find out the truth, and he mentions that he will tell them the truth, but they have to promise him to not tell anyone about this. The king promises him, and Cain mentions that he has memories from his past life. Memories of a different land called Japan, and their first king also came from there. He apologizes for not telling them about this sooner, and Garm then asks him if he is really his son. Cain mentions that there is no doubt about this, as the gods told him this himself, and everyone is surprised to hear that Cain has met the gods. Cain states that he has met them several times at the church, and Garm then asks Cain to show them his stats. Cain then shows them his real stats, and they notice that Cain has the title Gods Chosen, and he has level 10 blessings from all the gods. The king then mentions that if he told them about this title sooner, then everyone in this kingdom, including himself, would have bowed down to him. Cain states that this is not what he wants, and he mentions that he may have memories from his past life, but he is content with his life right now. He states that he had lost his parents and grandfather in his previous world, but here he is blessed with a wonderful circle of friends and family, and he can live a happy life. Cain then apologizes for keeping his past a secret, and he asks everyone to treat him the same way that they always have. The king understands, and Tefana then comes into the room looking for Cain. She mentions that she has received her father's approval for her marriage, and she takes Cain away with her. The king then tells everyone that they should not speak to anyone about this matter, and he hopes that Cain would protect this country, his family, and everyone else who seeks his help. Later Telestia and Silk ask Cain how he ended up being engaged to Tefana, and Cain states that this just happened after their mock battle. Silk wonders how many more fiancés he is going to have, and Tefana then comes looking for Cain. She drags him away saying that they should have a mock battle again, and Cain can't do anything about it. Thanks for watching parts 1 to 6, the rest of the parts will be on my channel. Please like and share the video if you enjoyed it, and make sure to hit the subscribe button, and turn on the notification bell to keep